Hey guys, and welcome to another edition of CastCast. I am your host, Casty Streeter, and today, per obvious reasons, is the picks for the conference championships. Now, I already really know who I'm going to pick. To me, it just makes sense, and I mean, with that being said, I think that, you know, obviously these teams, know each other very, very well. One being divisional matchup, and then the other being essentially kind of what we have on repeat in the playoffs almost every single year. Not every single year, but you know what I mean. It feels like this inevitably happens in the AFC every year, to some extent. But moving on, we're going to talk about the Commanders Eagles game first. The Commanders, to me, as 6-point underdogs, is kind of a little disrespectful. I think that the Commanders, they have the best quarterback the way he's playing in the playoffs right now. Hot take. Jaden Daniels is playing very, very, very well. And it seems even more incredible than how CJ Stroud's season went last year for a rookie QB in terms of, playoff success and how well he's playing. Now, the Eagles, Hurts is dealing with an injury. How much is that going to limit him? How much is that going to really affect their offense? Because, like I've said all year, their pass game hasn't really clicked all too well for the most part. And he's not had very many games where it's like, wow, he's really developed as a passer. They've really, really relied on Saquon very, very heavily and the use of Jalen Hurts' legs. And with the injury that he has, I remember seeing the end of the game, last week against the Rams. He was a liability and essentially let the Rams, back into the game. And don't get me wrong, the Rams, at the end of the game, they were playing the way they should have been playing the whole game, and they probably would have won that game. But, too little, too late. And, the Eagles, to me, they got pretty lucky, with the turnovers that they got afforded because they didn't put up any impressive amount of yards, and in this game. The to me, you put up, around the same amount of yards as the Rams, but they ultimately had two turnovers, and you're still only able to win by 6. And you had less first downs, you had about the same time of possession, and it just to me looks not good. Not good that you had to be bailed out by the snow, and that ultimately affected the Rams quite a bit until they finally really gave the Eagles a run for their money, driving down the field, having more than enough time, but just essentially, shooting themselves in the foot, which, good teams are not going to do. I'm not going to say that the Commanders are immune to such things, but I think that the way that they're playing is just incredible, and they've really come like full circle. They have, not a lot of weapons, I guess, per se, but they do with what they have. And Jaden Daniels is, essentially mini Lamar Jackson in a way, where it's like doesn't do everything quite as well, but he still does it at an above average effort. Now, obviously, the Commanders went up against the Lions, which was a butchered defense, but to me, it's like Jaden Daniels really did well with the pressure that was brought along by Detroit last week, and ultimately made the Lions suffer for it. And I think that if you're gonna play dome coverage against Jaden Daniels, he's gonna be able to dice you up underneath because he's been making some really accurate throws. And a lot of these wide receivers, he's spreading the ball around a lot, and he's not leaving anybody out of it. So it's like if you have one crack in that defense, it's going to cost you because of the way Jaden Daniels is playing. And with that being said, I'm picking Washington because it doesn't seem to me like going into Philadelphia, which so many people say is so hostile and so crazy. I just think that, you know, with him having experience there already prior this season, I think that he's, you know, going to know what it's like and he's going to be able to overcome that. So I'm going with Washington over Philadelphia, you know, to go to the Super Bowl this year. Now moving on to the Bills versus Chiefs. Obviously, you know, we all know the Bills, you know, a crazy game against the Ravens, a game that without turnovers, you know, could have been much, you know, the speculation could have been that, you know, the Ravens, you know, pull out a narrow victory in that game, but they did get turnovers and they essentially stuck to kind of their game plan, you know, a hard-nosed running game plan. Didn't have Josh Allen throw a lot. I think that, you know, that's very wise. Despite you being at home, you want to be able to like control the clock, control, you know, the outcome of the game through being able to convert first downs, wear down the defense, and essentially give them a time clock disadvantage. Now, that's going to be very necessary going into Kansas City, a team that hasn't lost at home yet this year. You know, I understand that, but we all know that Kansas City has really kind of, you know, eked out of some of these games, you know, and last week it's like they got, you know, some calls, you know, that were very controversial. I'm not going to talk much about those, but from what I've been watching this week is that, you know, even from Pereira, the former head of officiating, he said, "Oh no, you don't call those. It isn't like they were forcible contact, and really those penalties are to protect the players." And it's like, you know, if Mahomes doesn't have to go, you know, and leave and get tested for like concussion protocol for any of that sort of thing, I honestly think that it's like it's a beneficial flag more than, you know, a player safety flag, you know. So, you know, but all that aside, I think the Bills can really run against Kansas City. I think that, you know, they just went up against, you know, the Ravens, who I think have a better run defense than Kansas City does. Not to say that Kansas City's isn't bad, but they're going to need the run game to really quiet these people at Arrowhead, you know. So Josh Allen will do Josh Allen things. Even without him passing very much, he was very, very efficient. And, you know, he helped guide his team to victory with precision passes and a high completion percentage last week. You know, so you can have those situations, you know, where you're running the football quite a lot and you're wearing down their defense. And I will say this, I feel like Kansas City at times, their defense has had to bring pressure and they've had to, you know, do that against these kind of inexperienced QBs. I don't think they're going to get as lucky against Allen if they bring pressure as they would against how CJ Stroud got sacked 8 times. I think that CJ Stroud just doesn't deal with pressure, you know, that well. And, you know, that was ultimately their downfall last week, you know. But, you know, alongside the penalties. But looking at this, I mean, Josh Allen is a lot more poised. He's a lot more of a savvy veteran than CJ Stroud is. I just think that they're going to have to play tough defense. They're going to have to play drop back defense. And it's going to be, you know, how clever, you know, can Josh Allen be, or how dominant can he be, you know, in his decision making, which I think he will be. He has been all year. He hasn't really been one to, you know, get sacked a lot. And I think I give advantage Buffalo, you know, at least offense to defense. Now, in terms of the Kansas City offense, and in terms of the Kansas City offense, you know, versus the Buffalo Bills defense, I think the Bills, you know, obviously running, you know, mostly nickel, you know, but they've really had their guys kind of step up a bit. lately and that sort of thing. I do know that, the Buffalo Bills, have a couple of injuries that were kind of concerning on their defense. I guess Taylor Rapp is out. That kind of sucks for them. So they're going to have Cole Bishop, and then Christian Benford had, kind of an injury, but he is questionable. I fully expect him to be able to play, a game like this, you're gunning to be able to play. But other than that, I mean, Taron Johnson, thankfully didn't suffer any sort of an injury, even though he was on the sideline last game, which is also huge. I think Taron Johnson, can do really good things, against this wide receiver core. And it's not like it's a wide receiver core that has been giving Mahomes much trust to throw it to him very much. I mean, if we look at last week's game, Mahomes didn't throw, for very many yards, and one of those was a lawn pass to Kelce, as we know, as a 49-yard gain. And that, ultimately without that gain, without those kind of free yards to Kelce and that sort of thing, he would have only had like 122 yards or whatever it is, or, less than that. But, that's besides the point. I think that, looking at Buffalo, I think that this team isn't really going to give. They're not going to give. They've played against Kelce before. And it's like I was saying in my, reflection video on Tuesday, is that a lot of teams have been just not accounting for Kelce. And he was ultimately the difference maker last week. I mean, if you take away that big long gain that Kelce had, they have 7 less points. And this is a lot more of a low scoring game, and in a game where the Chiefs only won by 9. And that was because they gave the Texans, a free safety. And, I'm not sitting that comfortably going up against a team like the Bills, who at one point in the season, they were averaging over 30 points a game. And, the Chiefs haven't scored that all year, I'm pretty sure, or some crazy stat like that. Kansas City's favored by 2. I don't buy it. I mean, I guess it's a double underdog weekend for me, and I'm taking the Bills in this game because I think that advantage Buffalo against the Kansas City defense, or maybe more so advantage Josh Allen. And then the defense of Buffalo, to me, it's like Mahomes hasn't had the best protection this year. He's gotten, I think, pressured, I think, the highest amount of QBs. He hasn't been sacked as many times because we do all know that he's very, elusive and that sort of thing. But I think the Buffalo Bills, Von Miller, Ed Oliver, Greg Rousseau, I think they're quite a good, good amount of pass rushers that can get after Kansas City. And that Von Miller, I think, is itching to get, maybe one more ring under his. So he's going to be super, super hungry. And I think that, they're very well coached. I don't think that this is going to come down to as much as as the penalties, type of thing. So I'm going with Buffalo, and those are my picks for championship weekend. Now, if you guys have any opinions or thoughts on these games, please leave, your comments down in the comment section. And if you like NFL content like this, I know we're going to the off season. It's gonna be my first off season where I'm still trying to upload twice a week, and do various stuff, on videos that I come up with, because the off season's rough in terms of, coming up with certain things. But, subscribe, leave a like, and, I'm your host, Casty Streeter, and this is CastCast. And as always, go Pack Go.